all four of our board members, the remaining committee members, other than you, board member Lear, are in attendance.
Okay, so I have, what do you have, 11 o'clock, 11:31 I have, is that right?
Hello,
And-
Chair Lear.
Hi,
Angie,
yeah, how are
everybody
you?
else.
Do I have, go ahead.
It's terrible that we can't say hi to each other when we begin these meetings. It feels bad. It feels so just, yeah.
Annoying.
It's not right. So,
Yeah,
good to see everybody.
I have enough antisocial problems. I don't need one more obstacle. I think we're ready. Angie, would you say we're ready?
Yes, I think we're ready, Jerry. So I
Okay.
think we're ready to start.
Okay.
Streaming.
Let me see. There's the participants. Okay, then. Trying to think if there's anything else. I may have to stop my video because yesterday, for some reason, maybe it's because there were so many people on that meeting, but yesterday when I left my video on, everybody was in a tunnel. So I turned off my video. So I'll try to keep it on so it sounds a little more personal. In any event, welcome to the December, oh, what a year, 2020 Law and Licensing Committee. I realize I've been a failure because Jenny Gravitt had an inspiring literary thought at every one of the Standards and Assessment Committee, and I am just barely connected and barely beginning. So I won't be able to do that even for this final meeting, but I do appreciate everyone who's on the meeting. I appreciate all the staff that have made this happen in their every last minute detail. And I'm especially appreciative to the committee members who have been so constant and so engaged and so prepared. And with that, we will begin the meeting. And I think I'll begin by just, even though I can see their names, I'm going to begin by making sure that all the board members are attached and available and attending. So if you just tell me you're present when I call your name. Member Cindy Davis.
Yes, good morning.
And member.
You cut out on the name there.
Oh, I'm sorry, member Mike Haynes.
Oh, I'm here. Thank you, Chair. Good morning.
Thank you. And
Afternoon.
member Laurie Ann Thorpe.
I'm here.
Yes, thank you. And finally, Vice Chair and member Brittany Cummins. And lest I forget later in the meeting, at the end of the meeting, thank you so much for your participation and your service on the board. And you will be an amazing representative for public education in your new role. So I wanted to say that just at the start so I don't forget. And are you here to hear those great accolades?
I am present and attached, so I'm good. Thanks.
That must be Freudian, because that's how I feel about the connection these days. It's literally another appendage on my body. So it was accidental language, but true. So we'll start with the first item on the agenda, which is item 2.1. And this will be a discussion of the Snow College Charter School authorization process, seeking now the approval of that process by first this committee and then ultimately the board. So with that, I'll turn it over the sort of the facilitation of this to Deputy Superintendent Angie Stallings. And then Angie, if you will invite to contribute whoever Snow has, that'd be great.
Yes, thank you so much, Chair Lear. Angie Stallings, Deputy Superintendent of Policy with USBE. I'm just going to start by reminding the committee and everyone in attendance of the rules that apply to what the board will be doing today. Just as a reminder, our 27755 Section 3 requires authorizers to submit a process to the board for the following things: a new charter school process, a charter school expansion process, and satellite school process. And earlier, or actually yesterday, you may remember that the board also approved a new version of 552 that hasn't gone through the public comment process yet, but it added to that list transfer school process. And you'll notice as we get along later in the process today that Snow College did go ahead, even though the rule was approved only yesterday, they did submit a transfer school process earlier this week as well. And then in addition to those 4 processes, our board rule 552, R277553, section 3, also requires an authorizer to develop a written policy documenting the process for remediation of any deficiencies. And so I believe, and that has to be presented along with their charter school, new charter school process. So there are 5 processes in total that an authorizer needs to have approved before they start working through approving any schools in any of those categories, whether it's a new school, a transfer school, an expansion, or a satellite. Now, the order of this agenda, this is the way we were imagining it would go. Now that I've laid out kind of the legal authority for what we'll be doing today, Daniel Davis, who is a USBE employee, he'll introduce himself. He is the board's liaison to who are currently acting that capacity. Dallin Punier will be taking over that role, I understand. But he's the one who works with authorizers and our USBE staff committee to review the processes and provide feedback. So he'll be giving you background on that, on the committee's review and recommendations. And then after that, we'll turn the time over to Snow College President Brad Cook. He is going to provide an overview, and then I believe he can introduce his team. But I understand that after that, Ms. Marlise Burns will then kind of go through and describe each of the processes. And so if it's all right with the chair, if we could turn the time over to Danny now, and then after that, turn the time over to President Brad Cook.
Great. Thank you, Angie, for the introduction.
Yes, thanks, Angie. Daniel Davis, Utah State Board of Education staff. As Angie mentioned, I've been the liaison for coordinating the reviewing of the processes that Snow College has submitted. A little background, Snow College submitted their processes originally back in August, and we've had the chance to review those processes, and we've had a couple rounds of recommendations to which Snow College has submitted responses and recently submitted some final documents with each of those processes separated out. So I'm available for questions if there are any. So thank you.
And by available for questions, you mean questions from the committee about that submission processes or your roles or anything like that, right?
Right, I coordinated gathering all the recommendations and providing those to Snow College. So if you have questions about those recommendations, you could ask. Thank you.
I see no one's hand raised. None of the board members' hands raised. I think then you can just, nobody doubts your good work, Danny. So I think we can go to the next staff or person.
I think the next person would be President Brad Cook.
Great.
Good morning, everyone. It's nice to be with you this morning. And yes, there is no doubt that you have terrific staff in Danny, in Deputy Superintendent Angie Stallings. Thank you, Michelle Bose, Scott Jones, Kathy, Dallin. Everybody has been so good, and so it's a real honor for us to present you today. My name is Brad Cook. I'm the president of Snow College, and I've been here about 18 months. I've been part of the Utah higher education system for 20 plus years and had positions as chief academic officer at Utah Valley University as well as Southern Utah University, and did a short stint as a president of a women's college in Abu Dhabi, which I'll tell you about sometime, but it was wonderful. I love education and very committed to it. And one thing I've been drawn to with Snow College is because it also it's the most intensive teaching institution in the state. Our faculty, there are no other institutions that teach more than our faculty, and the commitment to students is really superb. In fact, the Chronicle of Higher Education, which is higher education's predominant sort of publication, has named Snow College as the #1 institution of its class for student success. That's quite a statement. We're also the safest campus in Utah, but we've just recently, and my staff don't even know this, but Snow College was just identified by Education Magazine as one of the 10 most visionary institutions of 2020. So we're very excited about that. Snow is in a very good place. But let me just introduce my team to you. We've got Melanie Jenkins, who's our Chief Academic Officer, our Provost, or Academic Vice President, we can call them. We have Marlise Burns with us, who is serving as really our Interim Executive Director for our College Advisory Board for our authorizing entity. And then Mr. Stan Lockhart, who's been a terrific advocate for education. You may recognize him as being a former board member, and so he's here as well. So thank you, Chair Lear. Thanks, Vice Chair Davis, you know, for being a part of this. You've been with this as a lot of extra time to be with us, and it's really encouraging. So as you know, higher education institutions in Utah have fairly recently been approved by the Utah State Legislature to be authorizers of charters. And I think we need to say at the outset that we applaud the current work of the Utah State Charter Board in their work of charter school oversight. They do the state a terrific service in holding charters accountable for high standards. It's a big job. It's a complicated one, and no doubt probably very thankless job, but they serve a really important role. But what we want to make a case for today, as Utah State did a few months earlier, and as higher education, consider us as allied colleagues, right, that are also committed to educational excellence in our state. And that in some ways, having extra hands helping charters succeed is a good thing. And I think as educators, we need to think of our work as a team sport. And often we have a very kind of segmented, siloed approach to education. We have K-12 and higher education, and we need to be better at being able to have a much more seamless process for our students. Now, allowing higher education institutions like Snow to authorize existing or new charter schools, it really makes good sense and is really consistent with the national best practice. Some of you may know this, but some of the very best charter schools in the country are authorized by higher education institutions. And you don't have to look very far. Examples in Michigan and New York, Florida. And this really shouldn't be surprising because colleges and universities have education-related missions that are aligned with the goals of high-quality authorizing, such as increasing college attainment for underrepresented students. That's a huge priority for us. Improving teaching and learning practices. It's a priority for us. Creating pathways for students to better succeed academically. That's a priority for us. So partnering with higher education, what we feel is that charter schools are not only held to high standards, but places like Snow College and maybe Utah State can actually provide additional professional development for teachers, charter administrations, and boards to help remediate if needed. Because colleges can actually assist in a more direct, maybe even a different way, but colleges can assist in a very direct way given the close and concentrated association, right, that we'll have with these schools. And with our professional resources and teacher and pedagogical expertise, we are committed to holding charters accountable for high standards. So because of education the focus and credibility of colleges and universities. They're really well-known, respected organizations whose seal of approval might even help a charter gain community support and to help underwrite that quality. So when done well, authorizing is a catalyst for charter school quality and growth. The next slide, please. So why would Snow College want to be in this, doing this at all? And let me say that it goes back to one of the points I made earlier, is that we feel that we can contribute to a more intentional and seamless K-20 model for the state. It can contribute to good teaching practice and pedagogical quality of charter schools, and by extension, enhance the quality of K-12 education in our state. It will help us. This is a little bit more kind of self-interested here, but this is a way in which we can grow our Department of Education faculty so as to provide greater professional development and services to our kind of local and regional rural school districts as help to retain and attract quality teachers in this part of the state. It aligns with our mission in the sense that it particularly relates to the commitment of innovation. And with our online early college offerings, Snow College wants to increase college attainment. I don't know if you've been following the statistics, but Utah only graduates about half of the students that start. And in fact, we still have a lot of students who don't even start higher education. And we're very committed to making sure that we have greater participation of higher education. And with a partnership with the charters and public education, we think we can be a good team member. And another sort of self-interested is that we really feel like there can be additional enrollment recruitment channels for Snow College working with our charters. But again, it just provides more options for students. There will be no expectation, but we think there can be a relationship there where we can really encourage students to take on and go on to college. But I think mostly this will help us demonstrate really to the state and our relevance, right? That Snow College is more than maybe what it's been perceived as being, as this small little cute place in central Utah. This place has a lot to contribute to the state and really ought to be seen as a strategic asset that way. All right, and I just have a couple more slides. And so the next slide, if you could advance that, and actually go to, how is fine, yeah. So we've been working on this for some time now, and this is a little bit of a timeline that kind of shows you what we've been doing to kind of ascertain support and other kinds of feedback to get to where we are today. We have been working with Marlise and other experts about how to advise and guide us through the application process. We've met with relevant parties. We felt before we did anything, let's talk to our UC commissioner, some key state higher education board members, the state superintendent. In June, we sought the approval of our Snow College Board of Trustees, which we obtained. We submitted the letter of notice to the state board office in August, and then have been working really in developing sort of the standards and requirements. And these are the documents that you'll review today. And now in a process of tightening, thanks to Daniel and Angie and others, tightening up our accountability matrices. And today we then are asking for the committee's advocacy and approval for the January 21 board meeting. So let me just end, let me jump two ahead there, whoever's advanced. Yeah, this one there. I wanted to just tell you this has my priority as the chief operating officer and the chief executive officer of Snow College. And what's important to me is our reputation. We are committed. I am committed. Our board of trustees is committed to implement high standards of entry for these charters. We have no interest, no intention of lowering the bar, low because the last thing we want is, which is the last thing that the state charter board wants, is failing schools. So we want to be very vigorous about our selection process and who we work with. We're going to have particularly really rigorous oversight, particularly financially. We want to keep people away from the cliff as much as possible. So very kind of intentional, high touch sort of experience with these school administrations to make sure that they are meeting certain guidelines. We are known at Snow College to have a very high touch ethos, and our faculty with students and faculty to faculty, I think our faculty have a lot that can contribute. Our education faculty have a lot can contribute to teachers and on curriculum in these charter schools. But but most all, we are committed to student success, identified by that higher education, higher education Chronicle of Higher Education. We are #1 in the country for student success, so we know something about it. We know something about teaching, and we want to be able to do not only help them transfer to college, but in ways that we can help these students be ready for the workforce. So advance the next slide, and I'll just let me say thank you. I want to introduce Marlise Burns, who has really kind of borne the brunt of a lot of the work, coordinating with our faculty and our staff here at Snow College. She's also, I think, a known entity to this group. But let me say thank you very much for looking at our documents, helping us to make sure that we're going to be helping in your role, that we're supporting your role of successful students at successful schools. And with that, let me turn it over to Marlise.
President Cook, let me just stop you for a minute. This is Carol Lear. And request, I'm not sure if there will be very obvious places where the committee members can ask questions, but let me ask you and your presenters, your fellow presenters, to stop periodically and just see if we have any questions from board members. We'll hear probably eventually, I don't know, I can't see my paper right now about who wants to speak to this, and I see no extra people who want to speak to this or outside attendees. So, but if you'll just stop periodically so that if committee members have any questions, we can address them in a timely way, and I'll just let you choose that if you would. But with that, go ahead, Marlise, because I see no questions, and I would ask committee members, if I'm not seeing your hand, there's a small enough group that we can just ask questions if that's appropriate. So go ahead, Marlise.
Thank you. And thank you, Ben. I will do my best to remind the next slide. Hopefully this will go fairly smoothly. So first slide, please. Research from the National Association of Charter School Authorizers, or NACSA, documents the importance of a, new slide, robust authorizing environment to ensure charter school quality with clear principles and standards for authorizing responsibilities, including maintaining high standards for schools, upholding school autonomy, and protecting student and public interests. Snow College Board of Trustees will select diverse charter school models and encourage growth in diverse geographies. Portfolio schools will not only improve educational outcomes for the students they serve, but will also improve the quality of public education more broadly through the sharing of best practices that contribute to greater shared knowledge, collaboration, and ultimately improved student outcomes. SNOCAB intends to recommend for authorization up to 40 charter schools by 2025, with an estimated 15% or fewer new charter schools. The slides that follow outline the specific authorizing practice for specific types of applicants. Snow College created the Snow College Authorizer Board, or SNOCAB, to assist with its authorizing duties. SNOCAB consists of 5 members with unique and specific areas of expertise. One charge of this group is to put into action processes needed to follow their growth plan, which includes creating a robust authorizing environment, sharing best practices, and recommending new and existing schools for authorization. Having already heard some concerns from USBE members about Snow College authorizing existing schools or transfer schools, I just wanted to offer an analogy. When someone is interested in purchasing a home, a good first step is getting pre-qualified for financing. A savvy home buyer shops around to find the best financing partner. What makes the best partner? Perhaps it's one that has the best loan terms, or one that a buyer has worked with before, or one that can close the loan quickly. It's really up to the buyer to determine which financing partner is the best fit. It is also up to the financial partner to determine the value a buyer adds to their financial portfolio. So what makes the best buyer? Perhaps it's a first-time homeowner seeking an FHA loan, or one that's looking for a 15-year loan option rather than 30, or one that owes the most interest. It's really up to the diligence of the financial partner to determine which buyer they will offer a loan. Both parties do their due diligence and make the best decision based on a review of data. Often, after the buyer has purchased a home and the financial partner has extended credit, there comes a time when there's an incentive to refinance. Maybe for a lower interest rate, maybe for a cash advance to make home improvements, maybe for a shorter loan term. Seeking refinancing is not an indication that the financial partner or that the home buyer has done anything wrong. There's simply potential for a new opportunity that better fits the buyer's needs. Transfer charter schools fall into this category. So why would they want to change authorizers? Similar to refinancing a home, perhaps an existing charter school is looking for a different authorizer that better fits their needs, such as one that aligns with Snow College's mission as presented by President Cook. As Ben has put up, their board rule defines the process and timeline for charter schools to change authorizers. And SNOCAB does anticipate accepting applications from existing schools for this purpose. Next slide. Some of the criterion that SNOCAB expects of these transfer schools includes no ongoing concern in the most recent independent financial audit, performance in the top half of language arts, percent proficient or language arts MGP, and mathematics percent proficient or mathematics MGP, and science percent proficient or science MGP, according to the most recent data that Data Gateway offers to compare schools through their Compare School report. A passing score from the technical review of their interview, which I would call board and administrator capacity. And finally, what value does it add to the SNOCAB portfolio of schools? Are there any questions so far? We're now to the transfer section.
Thanks for hearing me, Marlies. Oops. I don't see any hands raised. I
Got
have a hand raised, Chair.
Cummins.
I lied then. Would that be member Davis? Right?
Cummins.
Cummins. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Brittany.
Sorry, thank you. Just a really quick question as you talk about the passing score for transfer schools. This is a question that I wrote down when I was reading through your materials. Do you have a benchmark set for what that score would be for a school to pass?
For changing authorizers?
Yes.
No, they have to meet all of the criteria that is expected, such as they can't have any ongoing concerns, they can't be on probation, they have to be in the top half of all 3 categories of academics. And then as far as the score for technical review and interview, since none have come forward, there is no benchmark that has been set at this point. But I
So you
think
have the points that you're going to give to a school, but you haven't established like how you're going to measure those points?
some of the points have been outlined. I'm sure more will come into view as schools actually apply.
Okay.
But I
Okay.
think more than anything, just to reiterate what President Cook said, they are looking for charter schools that add value to what they're doing. And so I think that will be weighed heavily when determining which schools to consider to allow them to change an authorizer.
Okay.
Okay, is that good? Is that good, Brittany?
It does answer my question, but it does add a little bit of confusion as to, because there's a couple other places where you've set, and I can ask this question when you're finished, but there are several places where you establish a kind of a scoring rubric. And so I'm just curious if any of those places where you've established that scoring rubric, is it the same that you haven't decided what the actual cut score would be to pass a school either to the next level or to accept them as a transfer school?
And I appreciate the question. I think I'm going to say no, there is no cut score. Again, they're being compared to a criterion, and all of the scores will be independently looked at for each of those criteria and measured against what Snow College is looking for. So it's not like if you get 50 points, you automatically pass the bar. You could get 100 points and still not pass the bar if you're not what Snow College is looking for. Does that answer better or make it more clear?
Yeah, and maybe once you're finished, once we get into the new school application process, my question can become more clear. I'll wait for just a second. Thank you.
And,
You
and
bet.
at this point too, Marlies, let me ask sort of a related question that I was just processing as Brittany was speaking. I think you're wrestling with making this a subjective or objective process. Can you conclude, or can we conclude that this has some subjective components as well as perhaps some objective ones? Is that true?
Yes, that would be true. There are definitely criteria that they are measured against and will receive a score, but there is no score that guarantees Snow College will authorize them. It will always be subjective in that Snow College will determine which applicants bring the best value and best match what they're looking for at that time.
Okay.
Chair Lear, sorry.
Yes.
Oh, sorry. Do you mind? So can I
Please.
ask a follow-up now, then?
Yes, please.
So in the documentation on the transfer schools on page 2, it says snow cab criterion for transfer. And number 5 and 6, they say a passing score for technical review. So just using the word passing implies that there's some type of a cut score that I passed or I didn't pass. And so that's where my question comes from is, have you established that concept in those two specific areas of the technical review and the interview, that they pass that portion of the criterion or meet the criterion? So that's where that question comes from, is based on the documentation on page 2.
And thank you. I'm sure as schools actually apply, there will be an ability to set a score that is a passing or a not passing score. Having no schools have applied to date, it is still somewhat in the air as to what would be a passing or what would not be a passing score for the interview portions, which are your board and administrator capacity pieces.
I can see you needing some data before you set that cut score, but I can see that it has some elements that are subjective and objective, but I want to make sure. Brittany, do you have what you need for now?
For now, thank you.
All right, thank you. I have some questions about the board, both the authorizing board and then the local boards. Kind of a clarification, but maybe that there's a better time for that later. Would that be true? Marlies, you'll talk more about that later.
I don't believe I'm talking about the local boards, so no, please ask your question.
But I don't want to get you completely derailed from your more logical presentation. I understand, I'm trying to make the analogy, which is all we have, to the state charter board versus the schools, and wondering, the greatest problem I've seen with charter schools, watching them for probably 20 plus years, is the stability of the local boards and their consistency. For some reason, there's a real difference between elected boards from school districts and the more fluid, stating it kindly, boards, local boards that the charter schools have. Is there something that you've, and so I'm pretty sure you've had that experience too, if you're honest with yourself about your experience at the USBE. So I'm just wondering if there's built into these criteria, is there some process you have for evaluating those local boards as you accept those schools, as you continue to work with those schools? If this is the wrong place to ask this, please tell me. But if the stability of those boards and the engagement of those boards is the biggest problem I've seen, that's what I would like some explanation about now or
Okay.
during the presentation.
That makes sense. I think actually, and now that you've asked the question, and I will admit, yes, governing board turnover in elected and not elected boards sometimes is definitely more than we would like to see, but there are pieces to look at governing board capacity. And I think I address it a little bit more later, and I'll definitely talk about it more later when we put the slide on school review.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
I don't see any other hands, so please go ahead.
All right, the next slide, Ben. Thank you. So one of the other processes is satellite schools. SNOCAB will target schools in its portfolio, and if you haven't had a chance to read all the material, portfolio schools is a philosophy. It is it's a research-backed philosophy of having a group of schools that are not all the same. So when board member Cummins is asking about who's going to make the cuts, honestly, you want your portfolio to be varied, not varied in quality, but varied in type of school, their focus, their model, their location. So it isn't always an easy thing to answer in that way, but they want a variety of schools in their portfolio. And so they are going to target those schools in their portfolio and invite people to apply for satellites if they are successfully closing the achievement gap. That is very important to improve education. Next slide.
Marlies, can I interrupt you for a second? And I don't want to get a short answer rather than long answer if you can. I hear this, and what I hear in the back of my mind is discrimination, or I'm concerned about. I would hate to see the snowboard choose some schools over other schools based on critical factors. Have you actually thought about that, or considered that, or been concerned about that?
Absolutely thought about, not concerned at all.
Okay.
I don't believe there would be anything that would give me the impression that anyone that I've worked with would be use discrimination in any way, shape, or form to determine which schools would or would not make it. It's simply quality of performance.
Okay, that helps me. Feels better. Thank you. Go ahead.
You bet. So a school would be considered achievement gap closing by either exceeding or substantially exceeding predicted performance on state metrics with an historically underserved subgroup, performing at a high level with a subgroup, or making significant progress toward eliminating gaps on a state metric. So there's multiple ways to determine if a school is achievement gap closing, and schools that met that criteria would be invited to apply for a satellite. That does not mean that SNOCAB would not allow other schools to apply. These would be schools that would be actively sought and invited to apply for a satellite because they have a model with proven success. Questions on satellites?
I see no board member hands, so please continue.
Expansion schools. SNOCAB will also target schools for expansion that are successfully closing achievement gaps with the same criteria of achievement gap closing, meaning that they are substantially exceeding predicted performance on state metric with an historically underserved subgroup. They're performing at high levels with a subgroup or making significant progress toward eliminating gaps on a state metric. New schools. SNOCAB does have an ambitious research-backed plan to spur the creation of new high-quality charter schools. Next slide. New charter school developers would need technical assistance combined with strategic guidance from inception to their idea to opening. SNOCAB will work with charter support organizations such as the Association of Public Charter Schools or the Charter Network to provide school development and support services to interested new developers. This collaborative project is organized into 4 phases, which align to the phases of new school development. Phase 1 is building a strong foundation. So SNOCAB would meet with interested charter school developers and provide them with a topical handbook created by a support organization that also provides assistance to developers throughout the process. This phase, building a strong foundation, is about a 3 to 6 month process, making sure you know what a public school is, you understand what the expectations are, you have the right people involved in a board. So Chair Lear, this would be a place where looking at board membership would be looked at pretty critically and tried to be shored up. Phase 2, SNOCAB application itself, which may take between 6 to 12 months. It would include a 5-year budget and school design. SNOCAB staff would provide training to interested developers on the application. Developers would then work on the application, budget, and school design. Phase 3 would be the authorization process, which would take up to 3 months, where SNOCAB would evaluate and consider charter applications against an objective and robust criterion and determine which to authorize. This phase, again, would take about 3 months. And then finally, the opening or the planning phase to ensure a smooth and on-time opening. SNOCAB staff would again assist authorized schools with the necessary steps to open on time, and that would be between 6 to 12 months. Any questions on new schools?
Let's see, I don't see any from the committee.
There is one hand.
Yes, now it is. Member Cummins, thank you. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Chair Lear. Okay, so this is a related question, similar to when you were talking about transfers. So in your timeline, you talk about objective and robust criterion, and yet similarly in this process, you have a point system established in a rubric, and I can't see a type of a cut score, a decision-making rubric, I guess, from the administrative side. What would you consider an appropriate number of points for a school to earn in order to pass to the next level or be approved?
Again, I don't think there's a cut score. I think the board approves the schools that best match what they're needing at the time. They have not set a cut score at this point. They may choose in future to set a cut score. But at this point in time, they are looking at each element of the application, determining if it is in the area that they're feeling comfortable, and then they would make a decision.
Can I ask maybe what the thought process was in establishing a rubric if the scoring wasn't going to be an important part of the decision-making process?
It was created based on a requirement from your response to SNOCAB saying you have to have a rubric. So a rubric.
Okay. So then you're saying the intent would be we have a rubric, but we're not going to use it?
Not at all.
We're not going to use the rubric or the points to make the decision for a school?
The rubric will definitely be used, but at this point in time, there's no absolute cut score that has been set.
Okay. So one of the questions I have then is on the rubric, there's 4 levels. So I'm on page 13-ish of the new schools document. Or excuse me, I think the rubric starts on page 11. And you have fully developed, well-developed, and then adequately developed. And under adequately developed, a school can receive 12 to 22 points. And it says, the application does not include a detailed plan or data points to show how the developer will ensure the produced charter school will achieve the priorities. The applicant includes some information around each required element, but does not explain how the proposed charter school will produce results. So I guess my question is Snow College looking at moving schools forward as adequately developed that do not have a well-articulated or detailed plan for success?
I believe that is why a final cut score is not set. They would look at each element individually, and if they may choose to say that only those that have all fully developed, regardless of the score, move on, or only those that are all in the well-developed category for each area would move on. But there's no set cut score. So it could be that one section could be adequately developed and still be able to move on in the process, then receiving support from the staff to shore that up before they are authorized or opened.
Let's go. Brittany, would you be okay if we go to Member Davis, or do you still have another follow-up?
I have one other question that's slightly different. Is that okay if I ask that one?
Yes, go ahead, please.
Okay. Also in on your new schools information, sorry, can't see very. Where paragraph 2 on your new schools, it says you'll select diverse charter school models and encourage growth in diverse geographies. So my first question is, how do you define diverse charter schools, and how do you define diverse geographies? And then also in this paragraph, you talk about such as populations, such as students who have been expelled, habitually truant dropouts, pregnant and parenting teens, highly mobile students, and which I think is a very noble goal and mission to have. In my experience, however, in my personal experience with a charter school that works with families and students who struggle with poverty and high mobility, it's a really it's an uphill journey, and it's very difficult. And in here you talk about an adjusted accountability metric. And can you tell me a little bit more about that accountability, that adjusted accountability metric that you have envisioned, and then what you plan to do when your adjusted accountability comes into contact with state and federal accountability for Title I and turnaround programs that sometimes supersede or may not allow you to create some of the flexibilities that you may hope to for schools that are progressing in that very difficult uphill battle. Do you understand my question? Sorry, that was a little.
I do. I'll start with the first one of defining diverse models. So diverse models would just be models that have, I think it's almost a self-explanatory word, just diversity amongst models. So rather than only selecting or choosing, for example, early college high schools, Snow College would hope to have some diversity amongst those models. Again, with the portfolio schools philosophy, it means having a diverse portfolio full of different options so that a unique need can be met by one of them. So I think that diverse models truly means just that. It does not mean that there will never be any two models of the same kind, but the intention is to have more than just one model that is approved. Diverse geographies, I believe also is fairly self-explanatory in that it means not looking at having schools only in one location, looking at more than one district, looking at more than one size of city or small community or town or rural or urban. I think it truly means just diverse geographies. And as far as adjusted accountability, I completely understand that many times federal or state law does supersede. However, I also believe that federal or state education groups are also looking for ways to better evaluate schools that do have unique circumstances. So I'm hoping the flexible models provided by Snow College can inform the research available to both the state and the nation on what types of models might work for different types of schools. Utah is certainly not the first, nor will it ever be the last, to have unique schools that do need a flexible accountability model. So I believe Snow would rely heavily on what's already out there and been proven to work well, and then potentially adjust it from there as needed, based on actual evidence and over time as different things are noted and happen.
Can I ask a follow-up, Chair?
Please, sure.
Okay, so for the first question, so when you say a diverse portfolio, you're referring to Snow College's portfolio of schools then?
They're authorized schools, correct?
Okay, so when you say diverse models, that means within Snow College portfolio, they're looking for a diversity of types of schools as well as diversity of areas around the state.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. And then, so then my second question of clarification is, currently there's not a ton of flexibility in the state accountability system for any school, including charter schools that are authorized by any authorizer. And so if you have a school that you're, looking at that's struggling, ends up in the school turnaround system for the state of Utah, there are consequences within that program that are outside of the authorizer's purview. And I'm just curious what you are planning to do as you may come into situations where an authorized school may be in a situation with either identified as, I think it's CIS or CSI for the federal Title I schools, or turnaround schools for the state of Utah, because all schools in the state have to follow the same accountability system.
Perhaps I should clarify. The oversight model looks at particular educational elements. That is where the flexibility would come in. It is not flexibility from accountability of any state or federal program. If a school is placed on school turnaround, then Snow authorizer would support whatever turnaround program is in place at that point in time. It's not looking to supersede or circumvent any of the state or federal programs or accountabilities. It's in the oversight model when they're looking at educational aspects and operational aspects. The educational aspects would be perhaps different for different schools, depending upon what type of accountability seems best for that school for that particular oversight and evaluation situation.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good question. I felt like those answered some of my questions. Cindy had her hand up earlier. Do you still have a question, Member Davis? Wait time.
I had a struggle. No, I don't have a question now. My question is, thank you.
Okay. I have one more question that sort of blends in with the discussion with Member Cummins. Based on what you're looking at now, I have actually two questions unrelated. Based on what you're looking at now, will your schools need, or will you encourage, or how do you see using existing charter management companies?
I think in the authorization document, they would have the ability to use a management company if they wanted to, of course, following state procurements laws.
Right.
I don't think there would be an encouragement or a discouragement. It would be their choice.
Plan, or the CAB plan, to provide some of the services that management companies provide for schools in order to save the schools money, maybe provide services at a more cost-effective rate. Is it not your plan to do that currently?
That has not been discussed to date, but that does not mean that it won't be an opportunity in the future.
Okay. And then my other question, oh my gosh, I think I may have slipped from my mind. And it was more philosophical, and I'm sure it'll come up again. So please go ahead. And before you
next slide.
And Marlise, let me, yeah, that might prompt me. Marlise, before you go ahead, I sent Angie a text, and she's got a million things going, but what is our time frame for this presentation?
I didn't expect it to be this long, but
No,
I have one.
Oh,
I have
let me
3 slides if you'd like me to go through them.
Oh, yeah, I do. Maybe Angie did. Just let me see if she's responding. And she is. Hang on one second, just because I want us to be fair to the other presenters. And sorry, I didn't see your text.
Sorry, Board Member Lear.
Yeah.
I don't know that we had a specific time frame. You know, in the past, these discussions have taken a long time. When the State Charter School Board brought their processes, there were times it took about 2 hours. So it's not surprising to me that it's taking this long, but we do have, let's see, total, we have 7 agenda items today. One was canceled. I do believe that the last agenda item on residential treatment centers, it shouldn't go long, but I do know we have members of the public who are planning to make comment there. So this is probably our largest agenda item today in terms of time needed or time expected, if that makes sense. I think the rest will be much shorter.
Oh, and I just lost my sound.
We can hear you. We can hear you.
Oh, good. Because
Yes.
I wasn't hearing any of you. So, all right, that's great. I just wanted to have a sense of that. So, Marlise, I'm sorry for my administrative interruption, but go ahead, please.
No worries. So school oversight. SNOCAB will engage in a robust oversight of portfolio schools on an annual basis through desktop reviews and comprehensive reviews. SNOCAB will perform a desktop review of each portfolio school on an annual basis, with exception of the year the school received a comprehensive review. Desktop reviews include compliance elements from multiple perspectives, including input from USBE and charter school support organizations, performance on operational and educational elements, and notes from on-site visits of first-year schools. I apologize. Next slide and next slide. I didn't say that. The review will end with the school receiving a written report, identifying strengths, deficiencies, and proposed corrective actions. Comprehensive reviews look at all of the same elements, but are completed by an independent third party with a written report going to schools, SNOCAB, and Snow College. Any questions on the oversight process?
Oh, board members, let's see. I see a hand by Member Davis and by Member Cummins. Cindy?
I guess I'll just ask this here. It seems like, actually, you know what? I'll just wait and include this in my comments at the very, very end.
Okay, thank you. Member Cummins.
So just once again, just if you could help me understand I'm guessing that this is part of your school evaluation page. Is that where I'm looking for what you're talking about now?
What do you mean the school evaluation page? I
So
apologize.
So you're talking about making sure that the schools and evaluating them on a cycle, 5-year cycle, 10-year, and that's, I believe that I'm on your SNOCAB charter school evaluation page.
Okay.
Is that, am I in the right place referencing what you're talking about?
You know, I'll have to look it back up. I just split it into different documents the other day. So let me take a quick look and see which one it ended up in. I believe it's in the oversight and remediation.
Okay. Okay, so the 5-year, 10-year, and the 2-year cycle is in your school evaluation page. The oversight and remediation. Okay, so similar on both pages. I'm trying to find, once again, and maybe I'm starting to sound like a broken record, and I apologize. But what is the criteria if you were to take a school that you go out and look at, and in this oversight process, what is the criteria that you would use to establish some of the corrective action plans that you would say? It feels like there's a lot of information in these documents, but not a lot of clarity on the exact process that you plan to use. So you talk about on-site visits. What are you looking for in year 1? What are you looking for in year 2? What's the difference between the 5, 10, and 2-year cycle? What is it that you're looking for? And then what's the purpose of the third-party provider? What will they be looking for that would be different than what you're looking for?
Okay, so in the document with oversight and remediation, there are particular elements that would be reviewed every year. There were financial measures that were included for compliance. There are academic measures, which are included in the educational, enrollment measures, which are included in the educational, governing board performance measures, which are included in compliance, and charter agreement compliance, which is also included in compliance. So those would be the elements that are looked at each year by either the independent reviewer or the internal reviewer. It would be a desktop monitoring where they would be looking more, obviously not on site, asking for items to be turned in on every year except for the final year of a review cycle. Review cycles for all schools will be originally 3 years. That's what's required in either board rule or state law. I believe it's board rule. But after that, depending upon how well the school did on that review, they may be granted maybe a 5-year review cycle the next time, or perhaps a 2-year review cycle, or after several reviews, perhaps a 10-year review cycle. So there's no criteria yet by which they would be placed in that, but everybody starts with a 3-year cycle because that's the requirement in board rule.
Can I ask a follow-up, Chair?
Yes, please.
Okay, so in these areas, so on your oversight model page, you have the different elements that you're looking for, but you use the words rates of in many of those, but there's no established benchmark that you're looking for, rate of earning credit at grade level achievement. How would you measure an effective model and someone that's moving forward well? How would you evaluate effective rates of teacher retention or student retention? And so I guess it's just, I'm not trying to be overly difficult, I promise, because I recognize the importance of being somewhat subjective in these conversations, but to be completely absent of establishing criteria or a benchmark then how does a charter school know what it is that they're even working toward if they don't know how they're going to be measured once these when these monitoring visits are taking place?
Marlies,
Yes,
do you want to respond? Are you thinking about it?
I'm thinking how to respond. Yes.
Okay. Okay.
I think that some of them will have to be set later. When you use the term benchmark, I think like national benchmark, and I don't believe there are benchmarks for a lot of these things. I believe a lot of them are regional. I believe a lot of them are subjective. I don't think there are benchmarks the way that you're using the term benchmark and the way that I would think of the term benchmark. I do think there are on some, and I can certainly do the research and provide for you the national benchmarks for these items, for those that have them. If that is important, I will do that before the next presentation in January. I think the point was similar to, let's use your own RDA. The State Board of Education have an RDA process for schools in the special education department. And it is not necessarily spelled out with a figure every single time, because sometimes it depends on how the movement has gone over the last 2 or 3 years as to what the criteria would be. It sometimes looks at a rolling average. It sometimes looks at other things. So I didn't want to lock in to a number, because locking into a number seems not the best idea. What seems like the best idea is to do more local research and see which schools are coming on board, determine what that rolling number should be based on their actual data, and then coming up with those type of scores. I can absolutely assure you they would know what the criteria is in advance. But without having any schools currently on board, it's a little hard to say that this is the number and this will always be the number that you have to hit.
Thank you. Do you feeling okay for the moment, or moving on, Brittany?
Yeah, sorry. Thank you.
No, that's okay. I was just struck by recalled my oversight question that's maybe appropriate now also, if that's okay, Marlies. I'm wondering if, in addition to the specific that Brittany is looking for, and I do tend to agree with you.
Chair Lear, you've cut out.
That you almost schools you have and how. Am I
Chair
breaking
Lear?
up?
Yeah,
Yes.
you broke up for a minute. We missed much of what you said.
Oh, I'm sorry. Let me try again. I apologize. I understand why you don't have specific criteria or benchmarks right now. And it is a chicken and egg thing for this committee, because on the one hand, knowing what those criteria are would be helpful. On the other hand, I can see why you need schools before you can set those benchmarks. But in addition, a kind of a broader, more umbrella type oversight question would be, how do you feel, and this is, it's kind of a subjective question, but how do you feel that CAB would be receptive to State Board of Education suggestions or advice, or our state level view of things? Do you feel like that could be a healthy working relationship, not a territorial relationship?
In each process, it requests State Board of Education input and feedback. I think it was misunderstood in one instance where, and I'm going to look at that same page that Board Chair Cubbins was looking at in the oversight and remediation document on page 5. And it's looking at compliance with state and board rule, pages 4 and 5. And it talks about specific things, looking at statements from USBE staff, looking at data to look at independently and all those things. And it says that non-response from an organization or USBE indicates no non-compliance issue from their perspective. Not meaning that there would not be a compliance issue at all. It's just saying, look, if they haven't said anything, one could assume that things are okay. if given a written request and no response was received. So I think there are multiple examples in there that SNOCAB wants to work with USBE and other organizations that know charter schools to receive feedback and to receive guidance. And I think there are times when it's very appropriate that it is more of a partnership. I don't think charter authorizing should ever be territorial. No one owns the schools they authorize. They make their own decisions.
I appreciate your response, and I'm trying to envision that will be so. That would be really a pleasant experience. So I'm keeping your words. I didn't write them down, but I am keeping your words in mind as we go forward. Member Davis has a question.
Yeah, I just to piggyback a little bit on what Member Cummins was saying, I do think, I don't think you need to have schools before you can establish a criteria, at least a general criteria. And I'm just saying this because I am predicting if we move forward to the full board, this is going to come up with other board members. I just have a feeling it is. So I think if there's anything that, you could do to, when you see those subjective areas, include to an extent the objective criteria that you're going to be using or looking at, it would be helpful. And you can leave whatever certain percentage open for, the more subjective areas, but at least the schools would know what amount that is. The other thing that doesn't belong in this particular section, but because we're talking about kind of a more review and remediation here, but I think part of where this was mitigated before is that the actual applications that charters would use and see to apply a new charter for transfer or for expansion, those applications were just included in the past of the processes. And maybe I should have foreseen these questions and brought this up in one of our 2 previous meetings, but I didn't. And just listening through the whole conversation now, I think it would help board members next month, should we pass this today, if those actual applications were also included in the SNO process materials that come to full board in January. Because those criteria are kind of delineated naturally in the explanations to the charters who apply.
That was a suggestion. Marlise, do you have a response?
I wrote it down. Thank you.
Okay, and let me suggest at this point, and I'm open to a reaction from SNO as well as the committee members. We're kind of targeting about an additional half an hour on this, but I think none of us anticipated this many questions despite our numbers of meetings. Would SNO be receptive to focusing today on the new school application process and holding for another meeting the discussion of the additional processes, because the new school process would still allow you to get started, approval of that if that should happen by the board.
Chair Lear,
another committee, more time.
Chair
Go
Lear,
ahead,
sorry,
Angie,
you
did I
cut
get
out.
that?
I was just,
I'm sorry.
yes, no problem. Sorry, you're kind of
ahead.
in and out, so I never know if I should start or not. But yes, board member Lear was texting me with the concern that we might be running out of time or cutting short the conversation. So I had mentioned that one option would be to have the committee take action on the new charter school process and the remediation process, because those 2 are supposed to come together. And then the remaining 3, the expansion, satellite, and new transfer or transfer school process, could maybe be postponed until January. And that way, hopefully we'd meet that goal of 1:15 as an end time for this item.
And I
think
go ahead. I hope you can hear me, but because I asked that question of board members as well as Snow, I see that Brittany had her hand up in response to perhaps that. Nope, it went away. Snow, would that be okay with you folks?
Let me kind of offer maybe an alternative. We actually, I'm wondering if we can have really all of them to be considered, but then let us work, then let's work with staff in whatever elements that you feel need to happen, so that we can just go to January and essentially have kind of a full conversation. That'll give us some time. It gives us a month or so to be able to respond or react to to any concerns or questions.
And I hear your option and your alternative. My concern is we won't even be able to get through the discussions of those other processes that have been concerning for, as we've discussed, those was the state charter board as well as another new authorizer. So I personally would not feel comfortable approving something that's had no discussion with this committee. That would be my reservation about that. Other committee members, I'd love you to weigh in on that. I'm looking for.
Board Member Lear, I thought I understood President Cook to bring all of the processes back to committee in January. I misunderstood that.
Oh, maybe I did. Let's ask him to clarify.
I don't think that's what I meant either.
Dude, I thought it was for all of them to come back to committee, not to the full board.
I'm sure you're an eloquent communicator and we're just tired. So try again, President Cook.
Well, no, I just wondered, so often what happens in our board meetings in higher ed or our board of trustees meeting, that the overall package, can that overall package essentially kind of move forward with details then being worked out between now and January with Angie and Danny and is there a way that this doesn't get slowed down so that we can kind of keep going? And I think the staff and us are willing to kind of work on, and we can consult you. You guys have been willing to kind of come in on kind of off those that have questions. We can do some work in the interim?
The state board is a little more hands-on than that, so I'm reluctant to say yes. But I see the saving hand of Brittany Cummins. So, Brittany.
I guess my question would be, just based on the conversation we've had here today, would be the intent of Snow College in moving forward in the next 30 days. So if there isn't a desire to really put some of those criteria boundaries on the application process, then I think it needs to stay in committee. If Snow College is willing to really look at, establishing some initial criteria and say, here is what we're looking for, that we won't pass a school that is in this range. We'll consider a school in this range, and this range is, 100%, right? But right now, the application process doesn't have any of that. Like that, here's a no-go school. It's just completely open, and there's in all of the different applications, whether it's transfers, expansions, satellites, there's a lot of numbers used there's a lot of numbers used in the explanation of the process, but not how the numbers will be used in decision making. And I think that's the what's problematic to me. And so if I'm okay going with Mr. Cook's plan to pass this forward, if the intent of Snow is to really look at that and establish some of those benchmarks. If you're looking at something completely different, then I would say it needs some more time to discuss to understand that better in committee.
Yeah, I would say I think this is really great feedback, and if that's what it takes to, others have put some more detail around these. You have our commitment there, because we're going to have to get there anyway, right? We're going to have to get there. I just think we were sort of maybe asked earlier than maybe we anticipated. But if that's what you're looking for, then listen, it's your committee. But I also know bureaucracy, and we have there's a lot of other things going on. So if that will help, if that's all that is of concern, then, but if there are other concerns, then listen, we want to be that partner.
I'm reluctant. I'm one of 5 members, equal members. My reluctance is that with other authorizers, State Charter Board, even another more recent one, USU, the greatest concern for me has been the satellite schools, and so I don't want to shortchange that at all, and I don't want to promise that I'm comfortable with it until we've had an opportunity to talk through it, and we're not going to have that opportunity today. I'm more concerned almost with satellite schools than with the initial school approval. And I also understand bureaucracy. I've lived in it for 40 years. But I can assure you it took us 2 committee meetings with USU. It took about 2 committee meetings with the State Charter Board. So it hasn't taken 6 months with either of those. I just think we're going to have a shift of committee here come January also. So we may end up having to go do all of this again so that the committee members feel comfortable reviewing this. So I think we can actually do you a favor if we can say yes to one process and then have a different committee address the additional processes.
If that's what it takes. I mean, if that's what you think would, because it does alarm me that we're going to have another change of committee members. You had a recent set of rules that were just passed. As long as this is not capricious and as not discriminatory, then we're happy to move forward.
I feel like it's not, and it's inevitable. It's not my choice to have a new committee that's a board process that the timing was unfortunate for you. So I feel like it's neither capricious nor aimed directly at you. It's about being realistic and the board is, I think one of the differences between the state school board and some higher ed boards is that the state board has decided it wants to be quite hands-on. So I think the board, even if this committee didn't feel this way, the board would probably take longer if the committee is not more thorough.
Clear,
please, Angie.
Sorry, thank you. Just as to the capriciousness, just hopefully as a reminder, both the State Charter School Board took 2 meetings for just their new school process and remediation, and it was quite lengthy, both meetings. And then they had another set of meetings for their other 3 processes. Utah State also took 2 meetings, committee meetings, and they only had the 2, not the full 5. So I don't think that the committee is treating Snow College any differently. It's just, fortunately or unfortunately, there's a lot of interest, and it does take more time, I think, than people realize. So just wanted you to know that this is not out of the ordinary. It's very much on par with the questions and the time it took for the other 2 authorizers.
We just want to be overachievers, Angie. That's all. We want to,
I thought you were just, say, we just want to be over. We'll proceed that way. And so if your emphasis would be on the new school process, I think that would help us be able to reach some conclusion today about some portion of your processes. And I'm not seeing any objections, but I'm seeing a comment from Cindy Davis. So let's hear that.
When you say new school, Chair Lear, are you referring to transfer schools? Because I think that is the intended focus from the SNO authorizer, if I understand it correctly. So you're saying we should move forward with the bulk of what their focus is, and then maybe discuss the satellite process later. Am I understanding that correctly?
That is not exactly how I said it, but yes, I think that's a better characterization because the satellites are more the, no pun intended, outlier, whereas the new school and the transfer process, I think are more similar. Does that feel okay? Is that what you're asking, Cindy?
I mean, I'm okay with either. I'm okay putting all three forward and with the understanding that the specific applications are going to come back to the full board because that will help us answer some of these questions. Or if it is the intention to move forward with the bulk of what they're trying to do, and that's not going to, cause them to be behind on their plans, then I think that's okay too. And I would support that feeling of my fellow board members if that's what we need.
And when you say bulk of what they're trying to do, I would probably say it's the first part of what they want to do. So rather than, I don't want to use their time for us to debate too much about the process, but I guess I'll take the chair's prerogative to say, would you focus on your new school process, excuse me, new school process and your transfer process, and those would be the two we would be prepared to act on today, and then expect that we'd have a later discussion about the other processes.
Okay.
Does that sound reasonable, Angie?
Yes.
Okay, then there we go.
Great.
So
Well, listen,
sorry,
thank you
Marlies.
so much, everybody. Really appreciate that we're allies in all of this and with kids and good education. Appreciate I feel like I was in my PhD dissertation defense right now. Well done. Well done, you guys. So thanks again for your time.
So Marlies, are you going to continue then? And
Only if you want me to.
I think you still had some more to say, even about the initial process and or the transfer process, but maybe it got lost in our administrative discussion. Where would you like to go?
All we had left to talk about was school remediation and authorizer evaluation. So nothing specifically about new schools or transfer school processes. All of that was in the documents that were provided.
Right. And I have some questions written down. I'm not seeing any questions immediately from board members or committee members. Are you folks okay with proceeding in those two areas, the new school process and the transfer school process? But speak to me and give some feedback, because I'm not seeing your body language.
Did you ask staff or board members their comfort?
Wait time.
Vice Chair Cummins' hand was raised.
Either one of you that feel like, is there a place we want them to go, a focus in their last 15 minutes?
Chair
20.
Lear, are you asking us?
I am, specifically.
So I, with the intent of passing something today, it would be nice to have a focused area to talk about. Is that what you're asking?
Yes, and what we were proposing, Angie and I were looking at the new school focus, new school process, and the transfer process.
Would it have to be remediation? Remediation's required to move forward with
Right.
the new school application. Is that correct?
Right. That's what I also envisioned, remediation being a part of the new school process, which maybe lends us to say, let's have Marlies finish with remediation. Is that okay? I'm seeing nothing, hearing nothing. Yes, I think Brittany said that. So why don't you go ahead, Marlies?
All right, next slide. The school remediation process really depends on which tier the school is placed in at the end of a desktop or comprehensive review. If remediation is required, it may consist of technical assistance, corrective action plan, compliance agreement, or probation with terms and conditions for removal.
Okay.
Any questions? And it's written out in the other document if you had other questions.
I don't have any specific questions. Let's see what I've got in my handings. And I see no board. Nope, I don't see
Got
any.
two
So I
hands,
think
Chair.
that,
You've got,
oh, I don't know why I'm not seeing them. Cindy Davis, please. I don't know why I'm not seeing them. Oh, there they are. Okay, Cindy first and then Brittany.
Okay, can you hear me?
Perfect, I can.
Okay. Wherever Stan Lockhart is, I hope, I can't see your Brady Bunch window, but I hope you're gonna smile when I say this and not be frustrated. You know, oh, good. I'm glad. You know, I'm going to bring this back up again because I just feel a responsibility to do it. And I know that, you know, I just think in a remediation process, in one of our early meetings, we talked about Snow being able to be contracted to help one of its authorized schools through a remediation process if it really gets to that point. And Stan, I'm going to acknowledge that you said that that was an offensive remark, and but I want you to know that I said the same thing to Dean Fossen, so I'm equally offensive. I'm not discriminating in my offense. You know, and it is what it is, and I am probably could be the only one who thinks this way, and that's okay. I just need to say it for public record. I do think there are ways to go through purchasing requirements and things like that that can mitigate some of these concerns. But in general, if people have a chance and they have a choice of who they're going to contract with to fix their problems, they're probably going to contract with the hand that feeds them. Having said that, Stan, I'm going to make your argument for you and say that I hear you when you say your goal is to do everything possible on the front end to never get to that point. But I'm just going to throw it out there. I sort of wish universities would take themselves out of that contracting equation, but I don't think USU will, and I don't think you will either, but I just feel like I need to say it.
And thank you, Cindy. I see the other side of that, maybe, where one of the challenges of the SCSB as an authorizer has been that its expertise is more, is not as specialized as higher ed institutions. So I actually envisioned USU, Snow College, whoever else comes along, could possibly be a greater asset, a resource, technical assistance resource, because you do have a Department of Education. You do have assigned legal individuals. You do have expertise in probably organizational behavior that would help the local boards of education or local charter boards. So I also see that as an opportunity, and maybe it's like everything else, it's all about the money. How much is the local charter willing to pay for that internal expertise? So there's also that angle of it that I think could be helpful to charter boards, as opposed to, and it doesn't leave them prey to charter management companies. And I use the word prey intentionally, both kinds. With that, Marlise, would you like to say any more about transfers? We haven't heard.
I have a question, Chair.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead. Go ahead, Brittany.
So if we're speaking about this document in reference to possibly passing it in hopes that it will be prepared for the full board in January, my thoughts on this is, once again, in this document, you're using numbers inconsistently. You're talking about benchmarks as in you reach 40%, 80%, 60%, but there's no understanding of how someone would score, right? And so it's just, It's using both objective and subjective without saying how you're going to mesh the two. Does that understand? So like, for example, you use score tiers, 80%, 60%, 40% or less, but how does one know if they score that? How do you determine if somebody has reached 40%, 80%, or 60%? And there's no information on how you are going to get to that point. No ranges, no any type of technical data that feeds into your score criteria. And so I would just say, fill that out a little bit more so that once it gets to the full board in September, it's really clear what it means to a school that says it needs assistance. How do I, as a board member, know? How would I recognize a needs assistance school? How would I recognize a probation school? What would that look like? And so just making sure that that's clear in your process documentation.
Thank you. Member, I thought I saw Member Davis. Or would you like to respond?
Board Member Lear, this is Stan Lockhart.
Please, would you?
So just a few
Feel
months
free.
ago, Utah State came in asking for approval on some of these types of issues. Did they have clear objective criterion for these issues? Because if they did, that might be a good place for us to at least look to get some idea of what you're looking for. Did they do a good job in this objective criteria?
Angie, if that was that a question, Mr. Lockhart?
Yeah, I'm curious mostly because as we go back, we want to come forward again with what you're looking for.
Sure. Angie, do you have a better, you poured over it more times.
Well, I'm not actually on the staff committee that poured over it. There's another group. And when you start to talk about these areas, they're more about, rubrics on instruction and evaluation that somebody like a Patty Norman or a Jennifer Thronson might have better expertise than I would. And so Danny, I don't know if you've got a sense from the committee because you were part of the committee that I know reviewed USU's applications. And there's about, I want to say 8 people on the committee that include a variety of expertise. But I would definitely say the documents provided by both the State Charter School Board and USU would be good references of what the board was looking for. Utah State updated their documents, I believe 3 times, 2 times behind the scenes, and then based on feedback after the committee. Danny, do you have any insight to give to the group?
Sure, yeah. There were some of those elements included in the application, I believe, and I'd be happy to send those over later.
But Board Member Cummings, I just I think I need some more help in understanding what you're looking for, because as I look at this in terms of rubrics, it seems to me, and in terms of a measure, that the rubrics are pretty well laid out, right? So in other words, you have fully developed, you've got well developed, you've got adequately developed, and these all have ranges. And so as one sort of looks at the application along that rubric, I think it's very clear essentially what the school is going to need in terms of being able to get a fully developed score, for example. So
Correct.
help me understand what needs to be more in this that you're looking for.
Yeah, so I completely agree with you. My question though is, how will the rubric be applied? So for example, in my classroom as a teacher, I have a rubric, and the rubric feeds into a decision-making process that I make as a teacher. So if your points are here, here, and here, I add up the points. Oh, you get a B, you get an A, right? So you pass the class, you fail the class. There's a standard that the rubric feeds into, and it's the standard that's missing, or at least I can't see that. Here's the rubric, here's the score, here's the points. But then what do you as a decision-making body do with those points when you have them in front of you? That's what I can't see in your process. So if somebody's, what was that?
I'm still confused about it because I think it outlines the different categories, right? So in other words, we're looking at curriculum, we're looking at, we're looking at instructional methods, we're looking at student learning. They each have, right? And in the end, you're going to have an aggregated number, right?
Correct. So what do you do with that number?
Well, then what we're essentially going to be looking at is deciding, where are the weaknesses, where are the strengths? Clearly, we're going to be able to identify, where that line is drawn, and I'm not sure what purpose that provides is to draw a line. Otherwise, we're essentially, but I'm just trying to understand what is missing here.
So if you have a school apply and they are in, we'll look back. Right now, I was on the oversight and remediation, but if you take the new schools rubric and you go through that rubric and somebody, so for example, let's see, let me get to it. Okay. So for example, category indicators of quality of response, I'm looking at quality of the school design. I can earn up to 35 points.
Right.
So
That's
35 points.
Right.
What was that?
It's fully developed.
Yes, correct. So 35 points, it means I'm a fully developed school.
Right.
You have 4 different categories, and all of them seem to be okay, up to adequately developed, except for the very last category, which means poorly developed. So you've got adequate, well, and fully seem to all be 3 positive categories and 1 category that looks like it. And so it appears to me that you would pass a school in any of the top 3 categories. But I don't see that. I can't tell for sure what your decision-making process would be as you use this rubric to feed into the decision of should I pass this school forward or not. I guess.
Well, think about this.
Concern.
Think about this. We would essentially look. Listen, we probably only have 3 capacity to handle 3 right now. We probably would only accept somebody that was developed or well developed, right? So it all depends on the situational. We're not going to go with all 40, but we're clearly not going to look at those that just maybe adequately. That will give us pause.
Okay, so the role that the State Board of Education has in this process is to approve your process.
Yeah.
That is our role, period. Okay, and so our accountability to the charter schools of this state is to make sure that we understand and that we are prepared to recognize that an authorizer has a process that we understand. Okay, and so when you say probably and maybe and we might not, those are things that when you say what would it look like for you to authorize a school, and you've established a rubric criteria here. You have it. I didn't make it. You gave it to us, and it has numbers, but you haven't given us any information about how you will use that rubric in the process of approving a school. So how will this be applied in approving a school? I'm not saying it should be a certain way, but I'm just saying it's missing from the process information that you've shared with us. So you're either saying we're going to have a completely objective process or we're going to have a subjective process, but all the documentation seems to see we've got this objective criteria, but we're going to be very subjective in applying it. And so it's very confusing to those of us reviewing the process because it doesn't connect the objectivity and the subjectivity and how it's going to be applied across the process as you approve schools coming through your application process.
Yeah, it's a false dichotomy that you're making there in terms of subjective and objective. It's a combination of both. So just take this one example. Now, Brittany, listen, we only start out with that we only have capacity for 3 schools. We get 20 applications. We're only going to take the top 3, right? The top 3 that essentially score the best. That's our capacity. We don't have any, and maybe we have, 10 that have a passing score, but we have to look at it in the context of what our current capacity is and our readiness. So does that help in terms of you're asking us then to know that we'd have to map out over time exactly how many schools we were going to be taking on at what time? You see what I'm saying?
No, this isn't about number of schools. It's about the schools that apply to you. How will you decide if you will approve them? Because this is our one shot. We don't come back and look at your process over time. And so when you talk about capacity, that's something that you have to consider individually. It's not something we even consider as part of our approval process. We're only looking at your process, not your capacity. And so when we look at your process, we're trying to see, we assume that you're going to use this same process into infinity, right? For however long Snow College maintains the authority to be an authorizer. And so when we look at your process, we have to look at it as an ongoing process, not just that you're going to use this to approve a few schools. But what would that look like ongoing? And what is the criteria that you're going to use to determine a school's readiness to be approved? And so I guess the question is are you going to use a rubric or are you not? And if you don't want to use the rubric, what does your process look like as you decide how to bring a school forward? How do you decide? What if you have 20 applicants and none of them meet a certain criteria? Are you going to still approve those top 3, even though they're not ready? And so that's the question that we haven't answered in your process documentation.
Yeah.
And if I can go ahead. I wanted to add on a little bit to what Brittany said, but go ahead.
Yeah, I think that I think we can get there. I think we're just trying to understand what you're looking for. I'm not sure I do yet, but we want to make sure that you're confident, right? But the question is, we are going to use a rubric. Let's just make that clear. That's what this is for, and that'll give us triangulation, right? Different points in which we can make a decision about a school. And we may find out that all of them don't even reach up to adequately qualified, so we wouldn't approve any of them.
I would, to speak to Brittany's earlier question, and Dr. Dixon is also participating and has her hand raised, but I would have preferred a process or not so much a process, but an explanation like you just gave in narrative, Dr. Cook, that to a standard setting than even the numbers. And then we would have an assurance that we, meaning the State Board of Education as a whole, not just this committee, we could depend on for for the schools that you would authorize. That I'm not sure that helps either.
No,
but let's hear Dr.
I have something in mind. Then maybe what maybe board member Cummings has
can provide.
And maybe what we can do is essentially the overall aggregate score, right? Essentially how we might define, all right, if whatever our total number, whatever our total aggregate possibility would be, and have those at different ranges in terms of everything from well-developed all the way down. And then to maybe, in fact, I don't know whether you're willing, board member Cummings, is actually we can have some offline, say, is this what you have in mind? Because otherwise, I think right now I'm trying to speculate what you're looking at or for, and I don't want to do that. And so I want to be able to get to where you want us to be. And really, if this is what was required of USU, man, we'd love to be able to see what they have, because we're willing to use what's out there without inventing the wheel.
Can I weigh in for just a second, board member Lear? Can you hear me?
She must have. Board member Lear, mic is off. I mean, it's open. Why don't you go ahead, Stan?
Yeah, so our path to get here has been really interesting. And by the way, I think these are great questions, and this discussion is not, it seems a little adversarial, but I'm seeking to understand so that we can nail it. I want to get this perfect so that when we get to the full board, everybody has warm fuzzies that we're doing it the way you'd like us to do it. One of the things that's happened in this, when we started off, we thought we want the highest quality charter schools connected to Snow College possible. We took that message to Senator Milner, and she's like, oh no, I want you to take the low performing schools and make them better. I want you to find a school that's struggling but making a little bit of progress, and you can close the gap some more with them. And it was just kind of, it flipped our paradigm on our head. I think one of the reasons we have a little bit of flexibility in there is for those cases that Senator Milner brought up, is that there will be times where there's a charter out there that is just struggling and isn't getting some of the supports that they need. And the resources that Snow has in terms of, we're planning on doing some micro credentials for professional development. And maybe we have exactly what they're looking for, and yet they're a low performer and they don't score very well on our rubric. Well, what do we do in those cases? And so we've given ourselves a little bit of flexibility and a little bit of subjectivity so that in those particular cases, when where everything seems to fit, that we could still possibly accept them. It's
But
not to say we're going to, and certainly at the very beginning, we truly intend to get high performing charters. But there are these cases, Brittany, that others have brought to our attention where we say, well, gee, we need to have a little flexibility just in case.
Can I speak, Chair?
I think she dropped off. I don't know.
I can see her.
Yes, Carol asked me to step in. You go ahead.
Okay.
Well, I was just going to say, I'm sorry, it's getting a little too conversational. I wanted to hear from Dr. Dixon, and I'm sorry I missed the last couple of minutes, but let's hear what a little more objective observer has heard up to this point.
Board Member Lair, I'm wondering if you want to have Brittany, Board Member Cummins respond, because I think I think you had a question that may lead into about what I was about to say, if you don't mind.
Oh, that'd be great. Thank you. Go ahead, Board Member Cummins. I'm sorry if I interrupted you.
I just want to make sure there was a differentiation between new schools and transfer schools and what Stan Lockhart was talking about, because I understand that idea of taking a struggling situation and helping to improve it, which is very different than a new applicant, because the standard, and that's what I'm talking about today, is making sure that that standard for that new applicant that isn't an existing charter school, it's not doing its best in difficult circumstances. I understand that. But what I mean is how will you know you have a good applicant? How do you know? And that's what I can't see in your process, that like, oh, there it is. I see it. I see that good applicant. That's who we're going to authorize.
Yeah, and that leads into my comment. Thank you, Chair Lear. I think in terms of, for me, as I've listened in and reviewed all of your information to this point, that remediation of, if you will, or that process of technical assistance and corrective action, I think that you've outlined that. I'm reflecting to a process that we have in our teacher licensure, or have had in the past, and probably will continue to have. And that is when we set cut scores for teachers on the Praxis series, you're absolutely right that if there's this new test that comes to be, and we haven't had anybody take it, we don't know where to set that cut score, but there's some criteria that we use, and we say, we're going to put a band or bracket around a range that we think people will fall within. So as long as they fall within these minimum standards, then we'll work through that first group of test takers. And then from there on out, we can make adjustments to our scores and develop a cut score based on whether it's the average, the mean, the median score, however we select that criteria moving forward. And that for me too was missing in looking at all of this. It's one thing to say meets requirements and needs assistance, et cetera, but what are the minimal criteria that you're looking at? I'm a supporter of charters. However, I'm always bothered by charters that arise and look just like their neighborhood school. So, you know, what would be the point of that? So if we really are looking at ways to move education forward and do so in a manner of quality, I would assume that you could put some criteria together that would enable you to have a starting place with some concrete information. And I truly looked for it because I think your intentions are great. And I just couldn't see how you would judge it. So as I'm listening to the dialogue, it just sounds super subjective. And we're trying to help you. The board members, I hope you understand, they are asking excellent questions. I'm sitting here so proud of our board members and the kinds of things they're getting at, because we end up spending an inordinate amount of time with charters when they are in the failing phase. And that's never pleasant because that's about students and families and teachers. So just know that our board is really trying to help you be successful on the front end. So I hope you'll welcome the questions in that spirit, because they really are, I think, quality questions to help you get there.
I think that makes sense. And in that spirit, we will let's go to work on that overall sort of cut scores and be able to put that at the front of this. And so and we'll pass that back to staff or to whatever board members might want to look at it and shape it.
So I'm going to summarize what I think I've heard you say, Dr. Cook, as well as the discussion, and I apologize for missing a couple of minutes. But I think you're saying that you'd like to continue to work with staff, that you don't expect a motion today, and that with more clarity now from these committee members, you will add some specific criteria, and you will come back again with that at the January meeting. Is that a fair?
No, I propose that we move through the 3 total today: new school process, transfer school, and remediation, and then to be able to have that rubric ready for everybody to look at before the July or the January meeting, and then we'll come back to you with satellites.
Then I am. At this point, unless you want to make any final summary remarks, I'm looking for a motion from the committee. Member Cummins.
I'm not sure I'm ready for a motion. Can I ask one more question?
Yes.
Okay. Sorry, just to make sure, one more thought on the new application process. In that rubric, you also have an area for, I think it was in the new, there was an area for bonus points to be able to be earned. Did I remember that correctly, Marlise?
Only because it wasn't required criteria. It was other information they may choose to provide.
Okay. Anyway, just maybe consider as you look at the decision-making process and how you'll take your rubric points and apply them to decision-making, being sure that there's critical areas that if they're not adequate in those areas, that they cannot move forward, right? That bonus points over here wouldn't supersede like critical pieces. Does that make sense? And so just making sure that somebody can't pass through your criteria just because they did some other things that were outside of the requirements. So that would be my only suggestion.
Good feedback. That's good.
We posted a proposed motion. Is anyone on the committee willing to make that motion or a motion? I am looking for, nope, wrong place. Looking for, hang on a second. I see 3 hands up. Dr. Dixon, would you like to speak first?
No, I did not remove my hand, sorry.
And
Just consider
okay,
it down.
then,
I'm challenged.
next, I'm same. Member Davis, you're next on the list. Would you, you have another question, you say? Go ahead.
Yeah, I have a question. Can someone, I'm just trying to weigh this whole conversation in the balance, and also 2 other conversations we've already had with Snow College that have been lengthy as well. Could someone summarize for us where we are in the process? What are the pros and cons time-wise if we had this stay in committee versus moving it to the full board?
Angie, could you speak to that? And then if Dr. Cook has anything to add, we'll give them another minute. Thank you.
Yes, and thank you. So Snow College submitted their original processes back in August. And then you may remember, I believe it was in September, they withdrew or asked to not have the processes considered during the September board meeting, which was the first, it was either September, or October, actually, the October board committee meeting. And during that time, staff provided feedback. The issue now, and I guess what your question is does the board need to make a motion to deny at this point, since we haven't approved within a certain 90-day period? Or are you wanting to know more about what Snow can or cannot do for the 21-21 school year or application wise? I guess I'd like to know exactly which question you'd like me to address. Is it about our duties at USBE or how it might impact Snow?
Cindy?
Both.
Both, she says.
Angie, you're muted.
Sorry about that. I pressed a button and it made my screen so I couldn't find the mute button. So maybe Snow College, while I'm looking up the statute quickly and the rule about the 90 days, if Snow maybe could address the one part of the question, which is what they're anticipating when they were hoping to start receiving new applications, et cetera. And I will look at the statute quickly.
Thank you. And that would be Dr. Cook or Marlise, whichever.
Well, let me take a stab at it, and then if Marlise has something to add. So from our organizational standpoint, we also are kind of having really our own budgetary processes, reallocation if we're gonna, when this happens. And so in terms of our own planning, right, in terms of what is the fiscal year gonna look like after in 21, this is one factor of many that helps shape our budget moving forward and organizationally. So when it comes to staffing the cab, putting in place sort of key infrastructure positions, those are all kind of in the balance. And the longer this gets pushed out, then what do we do with those allocated dollars? We sit on our, and we're just not in that position to kind of. Anyway, that's where I'm worried that this just gets strung out, where it's very difficult to plan.
All right, thank you. And then if you look at our board rule in 552, so Ben, it's in section 3, it's subsection 4. It says that, or 5, I apologize. It says the board shall approve or deny an authorizer's proposed application processes and including expansion and satellite approval processes within 90 days of receipt of the proposed process from the authorizer. Now, where this gets a little tricky is they did submit their processes in August. And then I was trying to find the email where President Cook asked Chair Huntsman to postpone. So I would interpret that to be kind of a withdrawal of the processes, saying we'd like to hold. And then on November 12th, he sent an email again to Chair Huntsman asking that the processes now be considered in the December Law and Licensing Committee meeting. So if I guess what I'm trying to say is the facts make this a little complex. It's not straightforward, where Snow did withdraw the request and then resubmitted the request on November 12th. You could make the case that the 90 days started again on November 12th, or you could make the case that the 90 days started on August. However, because Snow, requested that it be withdrawn from the October committee meeting, I think we can take from that essentially the time stopped and the clock started over again in November. So I don't know if that's helpful, because honestly, I'd need to do a little bit of research and maybe work with Michelle Buse on any liability. But at the end of the day, if we don't approve it, there's still not an approval that's taken place. And the authorizer still needs to have an approved process in place before they can move forward. And that's what happened with the State Charter School Board, as you may know. So 90 days from November 12th would be February 12th, which would mean we should have these were denied by the February board meeting, if you assume that November 12th is when the 90 days took place again.
But the board also has a right to waive its own rules. We know that. So that is another possibility. Let's see if Member Davis has something to add, and then we need to move on soon. Cindy?
Well, I guess I'm just want to clarify, because I think they're still considered an authorizer. Can Snow continue to move forward with hiring, et cetera, while we work out some of these details with the process? The reason I ask is because, one, I don't want to put them in a bad position with what they're trying to accomplish. But on the other hand, I got a text from board members who are watching the presentation, from one who's not on this committee, who's saying that this person doesn't feel like the process is ready and they would rather see this go through committee one more month because they feel the same conversation is going to happen in full board meeting. So I'm trying to figure out the best way forward that will be the most effective in the long run. Maybe frustrating for this day, but what will be the most effective in the long run to launch out in successful and positive ways?
And one clarification I just wanted to make, Board Member Davis, is you're correct. Thank you, sorry, Chair Lear. They are an authorizer.
No.
However, the rule states that they may not actually authorize any schools until their processes have been approved. So there's two different things. It's not that the board is saying, we hereby make you an authorizer. It's that the authorizer does not have the legal authority to accept applications for a new charter school until their process has been approved by the board. Hopefully that distinction helps.
Just follow up, Chair, I guess so.
It does, and my concern is one of Brittany's early comments. This is the only shot the board has, and I wish the statute were not written that way. I don't think it should be, but it's true now. So I'm reluctant to do anything that is precipitous, that is not well considered by this committee and by the board. And so if a committee member wants to make a motion, I would accept that and look for that. I'm not, as a committee member, going to make a motion. So I'll wait for the committee members to either interject that desire or raise their hands for about another 15 seconds. And I hear no committee members, and I hear no motions. So I think we're to the point where we have to say we would, I can speak for the committee, for the USBE staff to say, we will continue to work with you. I think you have more information now about what a committee would be looking for. Somebody.
Got a hand from Member Cummins.
Oh, okay. Member Cummins. Thank you, Ben. I didn't see that.
Just curious about procedure. Do we need to make a committee motion to have this come back to committee? Since it's on the agenda to approve or deny, I'm just wondering, we can't just leave it or.
Just laughing. No, that's okay. Yeah, I think good point. Angie, do you have a suggestion about procedure?
I do think that for clarity's sake, if the expectation and hope of the committee is that Snow College come back in the January committee meeting to discuss these all of their processes, that would be a great motion to make. I think, again, based on my off the cuff, I'm reviewing timelines and thinking through the facts of, it looks like we'd have 90 days from the November 12th date. You would still be able to wait and have a committee meeting in January and pass it and either make the motion to approve or deny. But that might be clearest to just send the message to staff and Snow College that you'd like to ask them to come back to the January meeting to continue the discussion of the 5 processes. So Ben, I don't know if you could write that the committee.
And I see a hand. Member Cummins has her hand up. Would you like to make a similar or a different motion?
I'd like to make that motion, please.
Okay. So yes, if we can wait about 30 seconds and we'll have that motion on our screen.
You want to repeat that, Angie?
That the committee requests Snow College come back to the committee's January meeting to continue the discussion of Snow College's authorizer processes. That's just general. If you wanted to list all 5 of them, you could cut and paste from the other.
Yes, that's good. Yeah. And that's the motion. So I'll repeat that motion because Member Cummins said she would like to make what was previously stated as a motion. The motion is that the committee requests Snow College return or come back to the committee's January meeting to continue the discussion of Snow College's authorizer process. The process would assume mean all of them. Any discussion to that motion by the committee members? I see no hands raised. So would committee members please vote? And it looks like all have voted and all have voted in the affirmative. So we would invite you to schedule with Ms. Stallings and the other at USB staff to return to the committee discussion next in January 2021. Thank you all. I wish this had been a little more. Member Haynes has a, oh, is that just a vote, Mike, or a comment? Nope, it's a vote. I wish this had been a little more definitive, but you can see why. I hope everyone can see why this takes a lot of discussion. So thank you. I know that the staff will be receptive to conversations between now and January.
Thank you, everybody. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you. Man. Next on the agenda is item number 2.2, a data sharing agreement request. And we have Whitney Phillips to speak to that.
Hi, good afternoon. Whitney Phillips, Chief Privacy Officer. We have just one data sharing agreement request, and I have a gentleman named Adam. Let's see, what was your last name, Adam? Oh, Soliman. Adam is a doctoral student at Duke University and would like to have quite a bit of data here that is de-identified student level that looks at the outcomes of having kind of drug-free zones. And he can speak a little bit better towards it. But I know that some members of the school safety team at USBE have some comments to make on this and some questions as well. So Board Member Lear or Chair Lear, what would you like to hear from the requester? Or are there any questions?
Yes, we would. Let's hear from the requester first, and then we'll see if there are any committee questions. Thank you.
All right, thank you for allowing me to have this avenue. So do you just want me to speak a little broadly about the project, or is there anything in specific?
I think you'd like to speak, I think what the committee members would like to hear, and I'm guessing because they can offer their own questions eventually, but they would like to hear what you're asking for. You've given us a short paragraph and why you want it.
Okay, yeah, for sure. So basically my research focuses on criminal justice reform. And I think a lot of times we look at, police outcomes, criminal behavior outcomes, but I think these laws that I'm very interested in that every single state are these drug-free school zones. So it's basically you have a school and an area around it, and then there are heightened penalties for drug crimes. And the idea is it's meant to push crimes away from schools if criminals respond to these harsher punishments. But the reality is no one's really ever studied what the impacts of changing these laws are on students. And so every single state has them. And what makes Utah very unique is that they changed the size of these laws, like the zone around the schools, the buffer zone. They changed this in 2015 as part of a larger criminal justice reform. And the idea is there are many interactions you can imagine, hypothetically, that might impact a student. So you can imagine if criminals eventually move further away from schools, then you might not have as many drug exposure to a given student. If you imagine that police maybe change their behavior, then you could imagine a different impact. But because they really haven't been studied, this is where I think the Utah provides a very unique avenue to study these questions further. So things on criminal justice, educational outcomes. And so the specific data that I'm requesting is trying to track individual students. Now, I don't mean track in the sense of that we will follow up and try to find out who these people are, but track to see what outcomes change over time. So we know that you guys have data from prior to 2015, which is when the law changed. And then, sorry, the link. Oh, sorry, it's not for me. Sorry, I was reading the chat. And so, yeah, so we know that you have data well before 2015, so you can get a sense of how these laws affected students before 2015, and then you would see how things change after. And so that's why it's important to have individual students so you can see how their, let's say, GPA changes, their probability of suspension, things of this nature. And so when you look at a large sample size, you would be able to find out how these things change. So I think that's like the overview. Obviously, there are a lot of questions within it. I'm happy to answer anything.
Very helpful. Let me ask Whitney Phillips to respond first. And if you see any privacy problems with this request or concerns.
There aren't any initial concerns. However, this is a lot of sensitive data. I'm a little hesitant, and Adam is aware that our incident data isn't necessarily 100% accurate. And so, but kind of being a former researcher myself, I understand that a lot of data has missingness in it and inaccuracies. So I would say that the request as given here could be maybe modified a bit. For example, date of birth could be changed to grade level, and that is so that's a lot less identifiable, but that would be the only major change. Duke University has obviously a very good reputation, and I know being a former researcher that they take care of the data, but the board needs to weigh kind of the pros and cons of this. And I know that a school safety team member wanted to speak on this as well, Rhett Larson.
Thank you. Let's have one more speaker. Rhett, it'd be great. And then we'll see if there are any committee member questions. So go ahead, Rhett.
Thank you, Chair Lear. And I too agree that research is important and understand the importance or the benefit of knowing this. And I juggle a balance back and forth in my role. And as you know, I was a substance abuse prevention specialist when I first started at USBE. And Safe and Drug-Free Schools, the programming and funding hasn't been at USBE at least since 2018. And so there's a couple of things that I juggle back and forth is between working for USBE and also having my parent hat on. And I think it's really important that we have research and we look for areas of improvement or where has there been success in the past. But I also am very protective of our students and their confidentiality and student data. And I feel like if this information was to get out in any way, that could be very detrimental to our students as far as how the information is being requested now. So something maybe to consider is where could there be some modifications that Whitney said to the data that's being requested where it can't be, where no students could be identified, but also consider, what benefit is this to our LEAs? They have a lot that's going on. There's a lot that's on their plates right now. And they already participate in the SHARP survey where they give a lot of great information. Over 90% of our LEAs participate now in the SHARP survey where some of this information could be, where they could get some of this information. And so as a school safety center, when we looked at this on Wednesday, there was a lot of concerns for student privacy and some of that data collection. And we would hope that there could be some modifications there again to protect students.
Do you mind if I address
Thanks.
it? Or, oh, sorry.
Rhett, yes, go ahead, please.
Yeah, so I mean, I think always when it comes to this type of
Solomon?
data, yes.
Or did I get your name? Soliman, if I got your name wrong, I'm sorry.
It all sounds nice to me. So so to the point of data security, I think that makes perfect sense. And the reality is that we have a whole data security team. I actually never have the data on my own personal computer. We have a whole security team that puts this on a remote server. Only people who you approve will be able to see this data. So that's like, there's a very long list on how we make sure that data will never get out, as to your point, Mr. Larson. So that would, while it's always a concern, it would be absolutely minimized in this setting. With regards to the information about actual students, so the concern that we would be able to match that, first off, that's not our goal. The goal is obviously purely research and to provide, insight for public policy, and then also to contribute to greater knowledge. But to the points that might be of concern would be, as Ms. Phillips had kind of said, date of birth, that could be age, or as you said, it could be grade level. Any individual variable, there's obviously flexibility, but beyond so we don't need names, we don't need addresses, we don't need anything that would be able to link in any way. The only thing that would be considered, and this changes from state to state, personally identifiable information would be gender, race, and age. And so, there's flexibility if you feel that those three variables could be combined in a way that would be concerning. It's not 100% necessary. I think in order to give a more clearer picture on who maybe gets affected by this. So if you imagine that there is some discriminatory practice in, let's say, how police, enforce certain types of laws, maybe then race might be an important thing. If you think males versus females, but that's the purpose of these variables. There's nothing beyond just kind of understanding how different types of people get affected by criminal justice reform, but all valid concerns. And we certainly have a whole infrastructure in place to ensure that the data is secure. And the goal of the research is, as stated in the agreement that I had sent to you guys earlier. But I'm happy to answer more specific questions as they come along.
I am looking and I see no committee member questions. I'm always find staff helpful if you folks see anybody's hand raised. I do. Board member or committee member Thorpe, would you please go ahead?
Yeah, I guess my question is, so if we share some of these similar concerns and would like this to sort of go back to the drawing board a little bit to address some of those concerns, what would be the appropriate way to move that forward? And also just for maybe this question for, that's a question for you, Chair Lear, and then another question for Adam.
Okay, go ahead while I process that and let Angie process that.
Okay, so I guess,
go ahead with the question to Adam.
okay, so my question for you, Adam, is just, I'm looking at your proposal and I see that you specifically mentioned that this in Utah, is this in Utah or is this nationwide? I don't know, that we shrunk the size of the safe school zones, and that's why why Utah provides a unique opportunity. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yes, so every single state has some form of enhanced penalties near schools. Utah is one of the few states that changed the size of this zone. So you can imagine you have a school at the middle, on a map, and the buffer size used to be 1,000 feet, and then it changed to 300 feet in I think it was March 2015 in Utah. So that's what makes it a unique area, because in all other places, you would be concerned if that zone size never changes, that you would have some sort of sorting, like people would choose to live in some certain area. So this kind of creates some sort of like natural experiment of sorts to test its impacts.
Interesting. Thank you.
I think Ben was going to, there's the, oh no, wait, that was an old motion. Let's see if we can try it and look at what's on your screen and see if you're comfortable with this, Member Thorpe.
From there, you'd want to identify what additional changes you'd want to see if that's the direction you want to go, Member Thorpe.
And if that is, Lorianne, do you want to add to that, or do you want one of us to, what is your thinking?
It sounds like there are some concerns for staff. So I'd like to see if we could send this back and see if we can get some of that resolved before it comes back to our committee. So
would it be accurate when staff is addressed? Would that be accurate?
Is Whitney, is that?
To provide additional data. Okay, she's got something in the chat.
Yeah, I was saying, typing it as you, I was thinking that would be a language that we could follow, is look at additional data minimization within the request, such as changing that date of birth to grade level and
grade level.
Mm-hmm. That actually.
Good. And so, Laura.
But if that's the only concern, just strike it completely from the request. I mean, this is not a make or break variable at all. I mean, I'm not saying that in that I'm in a huge rush, but in the sense of if we're all here together and that's the only concern from the staff, it is of not substance at all. So feel free to take that off.
And what I heard from the staff was, especially Mr. Larson, was that there were other similar concerns, and I would probably prefer that they consider those and bring any proposed changes to you and the request back in January. So I would say that the committee directs staff to bring the request back to the January meeting with changes, including additional data minimization within the request. Is that, and I'll make that motion. Any discussion to that motion from committee members? I'm not seeing any hands. Please feel free to interrupt. I won't repeat it again because I think it's on the screen and I said it, and I would just be repeating it again. So the motion is that the committee, I will say it again, direct staff to bring the request back to the January meeting, again, consistent with Mr. Solomon's desires, with changes, including additional data minimization within the request. So that's the motion. And board members, please, committee members, please vote. And I see the votes complete and unanimous. So please, Mr. Solomon, please feel free to contact Whitney Phillips and work with her to come back with a request that will be more desirable or acceptable to committee members. Thank you for your time. Thanks for your patience in the last discussion if you had to be there.
Yeah, I was here the whole time. It was very interesting. Thank you.
Good sport. Thank you. Next item on the agenda is we canceled item 2.3, the chair of the board did. You can see the next item on the agenda is item 2.4, which is an action item R277-303, Ben Rasmussen or Malia Height, or whichever of you is in charge of
If I
this.
may, Chair, I'll just highlight really quickly where the change is in this particular rule. Ben Rasmussen, Director of Law and Professional Practices. The change you can see on the screen is on line 68 through 71. And then Malia and Shonda Moss are here to talk about the reasoning for it.
Hi, thank you.
Can we go ahead? Thank you, Malia. Go ahead.
Yeah, hi, Malia Height, Educator Licensing Coordinator. The purpose of this amendment is to align some of our practices around all of our educator preparation programs. So as part of the new licensing structure that was established by the board, LEAs can create their own alternative program known as the APPLE program, the Alternate Pathway to Professional Educator Licensure. And that is what is outlined here in this Rule 303. One of the requirements of educator preparation is the inclusion and passing of a pedagogical performance assessment. And for all of the universities that have ed prep programs here in Utah, that requirement goes into effect if the educator is to be recommended after August 1st of 2021. And so we want to have some parity and equity for the APPLE programs as well, so that the language is the same for all educators that are being recommended for licensure within the state of Utah. So I know that here on the meeting is Shonda Moss, and she is the APPLE director at Canyon School District, and has a few things she'd like to say in support of this amendment.
And before we hear from her, do you mind if I ask a kind of maybe simplistic question?
Sure.
But would this be a pedagogical performance assessment that would be be used in an LEA that is doing an LEA specific, considering an LEA specific license for an individual? Is that the point of this?
It's not for the LEA specific license. This is a requirement for a professional level license. So any educator who's recommended for a professional license, whether that be a university or the LEA's APPLE program, they're required to pass the pedagogical performance assessment.
Okay, I guess I'm not, let me hear what other people have to say. I'm not sure what the point of this is, if we could just use the existing pedagogical assessment. But let's hear from
Madam Chair.
Yes.
This is not a different assessment. This assessment is required and is current in rule required for APPLE program completers. It's just to add the date of August 1st as when that will be going into effect.
Oh, okay, that is helpful. My committee members are smarter. Jennifer Thronson, you've got your hand up.
Yes, I think
Go ahead.
Director Thronson of Teaching and Learning. I think the confusion that this looks like is that we're adding a pedagogical assessment. What we found is it wasn't clearly communicated and wasn't the same practice for all teachers across a traditional program and an alternate program. So the board had already charged a pedagogical assessment, but as we amended so many rules, this part was not as clear as it needed to be. And that's all this is really trying to do, is bring the clarity. So we put all our new educators on the same playing field, whether going through an Apple program, through an LEA's preparation program, or through the traditional university program. So that was the attempt of this. I think as I'm looking at it with fresh eyes, it looks like, ooh, we're adding a new requirement, but this is actually just a revision to be clear and to be equitable, that the systems, no matter what type of program you're going through, the expectation is the same and those due dates are the same. If that helps.
Thank you, Jennifer. That helps me a ton. It did look different to me. Let me see if the other committee members, Member Davis.
Yeah, if I understand it correctly, this is just making it clear that if you go through the ARL, you're going to take the same pedagogical assessment. But I should have asked this question earlier. I didn't miss here. It seems like in the past we voted that for the university programs, they could either do a pedagogical assessment from an outside entity, or they could cross-partner for an external view of their student teachers. Was that left in this rule? Could someone answer that for me without, I apologize, I should go back and just read the whole thing unless someone knows off the top of his or her head.
Malia?
Yes, I can answer that question. So all of the university programs are also required to have a pedagogical performance assessment. They have a choice of which pedagogical performance assessment that they can use. Currently in the state of Utah, we've approved the EdTPA, which is through the vendor Pearson, and also the PPAT through ETS. So those are the two that have been approved to meet all of our teaching standards in Utah. And so the universities can choose either of those two assessments.
Chair, may I follow up?
Please, yes.
I could have sworn after all of that public feedback that in committee we voted to a compromise for the university ed systems to either use EdTPA or to use a cross-collaborative procedure. Does anyone remember this? Am I going absolutely crazy?
I
speak to that,
don't.
Chair?
I don't. Please, yes. Jennifer,
Okay.
please.
Board Member Davis, you're absolutely right. The opportunity is afforded to the universities to design their assessments with the same reliability and validity we would expect in a pedagogical performance assessment. At this time, the universities that did explore that option have chosen one of the vendor-produced assessments and have not chosen to go their own route, but they have been given the opportunity to do so. It just would need to meet the standards and be approved by the board. At this time, no one has taken that charge on, although it was considered by a few of our universities.
That's really helpful. So it is written in the rule that way still, even though no one has taken that option.
Yes, because it's around meeting the standards established by the superintendent and approved by the board. So they just would need to come and propose their reliable and valid assessment that meets those standards.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer. So other board members with any, committee members with any questions? I see no hands. Anybody would like to make a motion?
I can make a motion, Chair.
Please do. Thank you.
I move that the committee approve R277303 draft 1 on first reading and forward to the board for approval on second and final reading.
Thank you. Any discussion to that motion by any committee members? Again, I'm seeing no hands, although some of your votes are still up. I'm seeing no questions or hands. So to repeat the motion is that the committee approve R277-303 draft 1 on first reading and forward to the board for approval on second and final reading. Committee members, please vote. And the vote is complete and unanimous. So that is approved. Thank you very much. Thanks for your expertise, Malia. Thank you. And oh, we didn't hear from the Canyons person. If you would like to speak, we don't want you to have endured all this for nothing. So would it still be helpful for you to provide your perspective, or are you good?
It's totally fine. I just want to say thank you as a director of the alternate program. If this had not passed, it would mean that any candidate that we wanted to recommend would have to take a pedagogical performance assessment immediately. And there's no way to prepare them for that, because it's a good 6 to 12 month process to prepare the educators for that. So by pushing the date out until after recommendation 2021, it allows us to get the preparation in hand and in place to be able to have our candidates do that. So thank you.
Thank you. And I'm sorry I forgot about that. And this is an extraordinary year. So we have lots of excuses and reasons for doing things differently. Thank you very much. The next item on the agenda is, the next 3 are connected, or 2, I think, are connected. Items 2.5 and 2.6, we'll start with 2.5. This is on Board Policy 4002, Utah Schools for the Deaf and Blind Advisory Council, and it's a proposed new policy. Ben, Joel Coleman, whichever of you.
So you're correct, Chair, that the next 3 items actually go hand in hand here.
Oh, yes, there are.
These result from HB 10, which enacted a sunset date for the USDB Advisory Council of July 1st, 2021. And so what these 3 items do, the first item, the board policy, recreates the advisory council under a board policy under the auspices of the board. R277-800 is amendments to the rule to take the advisory council out of rule, since it's now in policy. And then the final item is to adopt new amended bylaws for the group, taking into account the statutory change and making some amendments related to open meetings laws, which have been prepared with the assistance of Assistant Attorney General Buse. So, but the first item is the board policy that just recreates the USDB Advisory Council in a new form.
And so with that, do we have is there anybody else that would like to speak? Is this something, Joel, would you like to speak to this also?
Yeah, just briefly, we're completely supportive of this. It honestly doesn't change the functioning of the advisory council or its relationship with the board in any way. Just changes it from state law into board policy. And Ben and Angie have worked with us to make sure that that's exactly what it does. So we're supportive.
Thank you. Thank you, Superintendent Coleman. Board members, any questions to Superintendent Coleman or Ben Rasmussen? I see a couple of votes who are still up, but no hands. So would someone like to make a motion on this? Whoever's trying, please go ahead.
I move that the committee approve board policy 4002 draft 1 and forward a recommendation to the board for approval.
Thank you for that motion. Any questions to the motion or discussion of the motions from committee members? The motion, I see none. So the motion is, I should repeat it first, I'm sorry. The motion is the committee approve board policy 4002 draft 1 and forward a recommendation to the board for approval. I still see no hands. So the board members, committee members, please vote. And I see all have voted and it's unanimous. Thank you. Do you want to proceed to the next to the extent you have any different information, Ben?
No, this is the same combined group, and R277-800 amendments to the rule would be the next action item.
And I don't see any hands. I do, Lorianne? Lorianne?
Sorry, just took a minute to get to the mute. I move that the committee approve R277-800 draft 1 on first reading and forward to the board for approval on second and final reading.
The motion is that the committee approve R277-800 draft 1 on first reading and move to the board for approval on second and final reading. Any further discussion to that? I'm not seeing any committee members' hands raised. So would committee members please vote? I'm seeing all have voted and the vote is unanimous in the affirmative. So thank you very much, Ben and Joel. And one last item on the bylaws, item 2.7.
And so this is just the bylaws that the advisory council would use going forward.
Any questions, any further comment on that, Superintendent Coleman? I see
no,
none.
Board member Thorpe.
And I do see board member Thorpe. I'm hoping, assuming she's going to make a motion, but let me just ask a question because I feel like this probably deserves more attention than we're giving it. But you've said this once, Superintendent, but I know the advisory council has been very important and helpful to both the state board and the advocates for your students for decades. So I just want one more assurance that you feel like the advisory council will be equally effective and equally, and you will be equally attentive to their advice. Could you just speak to that as a public matter?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. I think that's good to have that on the record as well. That was the recommendation of the advisory council. It was also the recommendation of our administration, myself and the other members of our superintendency. And that's what we presented to the board in the first place, that we are not supportive. We're actually more supportive of having it in board policy than it was having it in state code, just because the board can react if there are ever changes or adjustments or improvements that are necessary. We don't anticipate any at this time because the advisory council is functioning very well and they are very supportive of us. And so as we drafted this with Ben, that was kind of the goal of everyone, is to just keep it the same, but move it under the auspices of the board for control. And so that's our assurance to you, that we anticipate that it will continue operating exactly as it has.
Thank you for that. I have seen times when the advisory council was very helpful to the USDB and times when there was distraction and discord. And so I hope it will be the first and not the latter. Thank you very much. And now, Lorianne, would you mind making a motion, or your hand went away? Maybe you gave.
No, it's still
Please.
there. I'm happy to.
Good. Thank you.
I move that the committee approve the USDB-AC bylaws draft 2 and forward a recommendation to the board for final approval.
Thank you. The motion is that the committee approve the USDB-AC bylaws, draft 1, and forward a recommendation to the board for final
Draft
approval.
2. You said
Further
draft 1. It's draft 2.
discussion? Did I say it?
Draft 2.
Draft 2, it would be. So without any corrections, we'll agree to draft 2 and forward a recommendation to the board for final approval. Any further discussion? I see no hands raised. So would board members please vote? Committee members, that is. I see everyone has voted in the affirmative. Thank you so much for your time and your attention to this. I always like to say that board, per the Utah Supreme Court, board rules have the effect of law. So I feel very comfortable with this being in board rules. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And the final agenda item is item 2.8, an action item on R277-926, certification of residential treatment center special education program. The individuals I have listed are Dana Archuleta, Laurie Lou Gillespie, Dr. Voorhees, and Jeffrey Van Holten. So whichever one of you wants to be first, please take charge.
Thank you, Chair Lear. Jeff Van Holten, Director of Public Affairs for the board. Happy to be here today. I'm just going to quickly tee this up and pass it over to Dana and Laura Lee and Dr. Voorhees. This rule regulates the residential treatment centers. As you recall, the states of California and Illinois have some students who are unable to achieve satisfaction in their IEPs in terms of the districts being able to provide them, and so they need to go to an outside entity. And they require that any outside entity out of their state has a certified special education program. So the residential treatment centers that receive these students have to have a certified program by the state of Utah in order for the students to remain there under California and Illinois law. You passed this rule in conjunction with some legislation that required we create a process for that. And the amendments that are being made today are not dramatic or very different. They're really clarifying what was already in the rule, but some of the residential treatment centers, particularly in the area of the rule about the application process, wanted to make sure they were submitting the correct items and information that we had in the rule for their applications. And so most of the edits you're going to see are just changes to what we are requiring in the application. However, these changes are in sync with what we've already been doing. We just wanted to make it clear for all the parties involved. There's also some changes to some deadlines that provide our staff more time and a residential treatment center applicant, more time to correct any errors of an application if they have any. But with that, I'm just going to, Chair, if it's all right with you, pass it over to Dana and Laura Lee, who might take a moment just to highlight some of the bigger changes here.
Thank you. That would be helpful.
Good afternoon. My name is Dana Archuleta, and I am a UPIP specialist with the board, and I am the lead on the RTC certifications. So, Jeff, if we can go down a little bit, right there. Actually, let's go back up. So we're talking.
Up again.
We want to look at how special education students are accessing the general education curriculum and what services they are being provided in the RTC. So we added a general education curriculum into the rule. And I think it's down a little bit ways. Yes. So it's on line 46. So a detailed description of the RTC and special education program. And we also wanted to add to the specially designed instruction and related services. And we wanted to take out the social skills, counseling, and parent training because we didn't want it so narrow. We wanted it more broad because we want to look at specially designed instruction and related services in all areas. If we go down to the K through 8.
Dana, can I stop you for just a minute? Dana?
Yes.
Can I stop you for just a minute? Go back to the page before, Jeff, if you would. And you've got related services. Is that the term of art under special education, or do you just mean generally related services?
Related services under special education. So your occupational therapy, physical therapy, and speech.
Okay, that's helpful for me. Okay, please go ahead.
Okay, so if we go down to the K8 evidence, we took out, Jeff, I think if you go back up, it was right under the last one.
It's Ben who's actually.
Oh.
So we took out, it just had ELA, math, and science. And so we deleted that just to make it in all subject areas.
Okay.
The next one is education licensing. And this one, they had resumes listed in there that would be acceptable. And we took out the part with resumes. And then they also had licenses for math, science, and ELA. And we added special education and then again, related services. And then we also made it more clear.
Did we lose Chair Lear?
No, I'm here. I'm wondering if we lost Dana.
No, I'm here. So we also
then we lost you at the end of your sentence.
Oh, I'm sorry. So we want to add special education licenses and related services. And then we wanted to make it more clear.
Cindy?
About
Cindy, why don't you go ahead? Sorry, Dana, this has not been the best day on terms of sound. But Cindy Davis Member Davis had a question. Would you like to ask that question now, Cindy?
Oh, I just put it in the my question was, do we have the authority to expand or adjust definitions of specially designed instruction? And is that found under federal law?
Like me to respond to that, Dana?
Yes, please, Laura Lee.
My name is Laura Lee Gillespie, the Utah Program Improvement Planning Systems Coordinator. So specially designed instruction is defined in federal law, and that is the definition that we are using to address this in the resident.
And you're going in and out, at least in my sound system.
I apologize.
Laura Lee. So
is that better?
Try that one more time.
Sure.
A little better, yes.
Okay, so special education, specially designed instruction is the definition that's found under the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, which is the federal law, correct?
Okay, was that your question, Cindy?
Well, I think you cut out on the part you were maybe going to answer my question, but my question is, do we have the authority to broaden or adjust it from whatever it was before? Is whatever we're writing here, does it fall within the bounds of that language?
Yes. This is directly within the bounds of special education law.
Thank you.
Thank you. We also had some additional information from Leo Voorhees, our license. Okay, thank you. Okay, sorry to interrupt. Go ahead, Dana.
Oh, that's fine. So in this area, the next area, we made the training of paraprofessionals more clear, because before it just wasn't clear on who they were addressing in that section. So we just made that more clear. And if we go down, the next section is we made the reporting requirements of behavior incidents also more clear. We changed from 45 days to 60 days for approval or denial of certification. That way, that just gives me a little bit more time once I've done an on-site review. And then we also changed the application for renewal from June 1st to 60 days prior to the application of their current certification. So again, that just, it allows the applications to be staggered, and I'm not getting 26 applications on June 1st. That way they can do it 60 days before their certification expires.
Great. Anything, keep going?
Yep, we have a couple more. We have,
and kind of as quickly as you can.
Yeah, I will.
As quickly as you can, because we have another committee on our heels. Go ahead.
On-site review within 60 days instead of 40 days. We're going to give the RTCs
to correct any compliance errors, because that's what we do with the public schools and charter schools. And then the last part is transition plans, and we just separated out that language. So there's a plan for their transition from the RTC to a less restrictive setting, and then what they need for post-secondary transition plans. And then I think the last material changes, we're giving the RTCs 45 days to let us know about any material changes instead of 30. And that is it.
Thank you so much for that very efficient explanation. I see now 4 committee members with raised hands. Can I just ask a quick question, and then we need a motion? I noted at the end of the rule, they have to meet these timelines, do these things. What happens if they don't meet the timeline or they don't do it? Do you proceed anyway? Do you tell them you'll have to stop and we'll have to think? What happens? What are the consequences?
So they will be denied certification. And then if it's not corrected within that time, they'll have to go through a whole process of reapplying again.
And when you say that time, you mean the required time frame? Is that what you're saying?
Yes, yes.
Okay, okay. Would anybody be willing to, committee member, make a motion, please? Waiting for a minute. Go ahead,
Chair, we
Lorianne,
had
please.
a couple of public people here to add dialogue.
And our time is, let me just see if we have enough time for that. I really would like to hear from them, but technology may not allow for that. Angie or Ben or somebody who's monitoring the technology, do we have time? Do we have a few more minutes?
Yes, it's not going to shut off right at 2:30. Generally, they'd like us to go no
Thank you.
15
yes,
minutes.
We'd love
So
to hear from whoever is invited.
Hi, my name is Angie Alvey. I work at a residential treatment center as the academic director, and I don't have a lot to say. I know you're in a hurry, but I just wanted to say thank you to Dana and Laura Lee and Leah for their collaboration with us and for approaching us with these changes. They've been fantastic.
Board member Lyric, are you having a hard time hearing? Angie, if you want to continue, sorry. I think she must not have heard something.
That's okay. That was really all we wanted to say is just thank you. So quick and simple.
I think Carol has been booted out. I think she had a technical problem. She's not in the meeting anymore.
Board member Davis, would you like to take over?
Absolutely. Do we have another public comment? And thank you for speaking.
No, we don't need to make any additional comments. We appreciate you guys' time and collaboration. This is Trina Quinney-Packard, and I am the CEO of one of the residential treatment centers that Dana has been working with us on. So just thank you again for the collaboration and the support. You guys have been terrific.
We appreciate that feedback and hear often about this great special education team. And I am sure that they appreciate you and your cooperation as well. So thanks again for coming today, and I'll entertain a motion.
And I just came back in and unmuted myself, Cindy. So I'll make a motion that the committee approve R277-926 draft 1 forward to the board for approval on second and final reading. And go ahead, or I will go ahead. Any further discussion to that motion? Would the committee members please vote? I see that everyone has voted, and everyone voted in the affirmative. So that rule is will go forward to the board. Thank you. Thanks to everyone. I don't know why my sound was so bad today. Thank you again, Member Cummins, you've been really helpful as a committee member, and all of you have been just wonderful. I wish I had more time to be more effusive. Anyway, and thanks very much, Angie, and all your staff.
Thank you,
And
Chair.
have a great week. Thanks. Merry Christmas to y'all.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
Chair Leader. Thank you, everybody.